welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our first roundup panel of the season and we're going to be discussing all the amazing fashion that we saw at London Collections Men. I've got an amazing set of men with me to help wrap up what we saw in our own native city. But before we start dissecting all the different shows and talking about our favourites, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Julian.
Hello, I'm Julian Ganio. I'm fashion editor at Fantastic Man magazine, and I've got my little dog down there, Doris, if you can see her.
Who'll be contributing heavily.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Gordon Richardson and I'm the creative director at Top Man.
I'm Charlie Porter, I'm a men's fashion critic at the Financial Times.
I'm David Hellqvist, I'm a fashion feature editor at Porter magazine.
I think we should start, as it's very appropriate, by saying thank you to Gordon and thank you to Top Man, because they do so much for London Collections Men. Amazing sponsorship and support of young designers, and I'm
but
sure
also not just sponsorship, actual genuine support.
Yeah, exactly,
like,
actual genuine support. Yeah. Very, very good point, Charlie. And I think it's really important to say that because all the collections that I'm sure we're going to talk about and say how great they were are people who've really benefited from Top Man support. So firstly, thank you. I won't pick on you any further because I know you
No, suddenly build up to something else now.
To the green screen.
You can feel it coming.
Give us a speech, Gordon. No. So let's kick off with talking about some of the highlights, because it's always nice to start on a positive note. So I'm going to go to you, Charlie. Tell me, what was your standout show this season?
Yeah, Craig Green.
Craig Green.
Yeah.
I think was everyone very...
Yeah.
Craig's very good, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was
amazing.
Without doubt the standout of the season. Wasn't it? I'm going to go to you, Julian, because you styled the show. So firstly, congratulations, because it's absolutely beautiful. Tell me what it's like working with Craig, because he's such a lovely guy, isn't he?
He's just incredibly organised, very focused, and yeah, just, I don't know, it's a pleasure working with him because he knows what he wants, and you know he doesn't kind of mix words. You know, he's just got a lot of focus, and it's great, and he really sticks to it, and he's just got quite a pure vision, and it's lovely working with him. Yeah,
I think it's interesting what you say about that pure vision, because I think that was what really struck people at this collection, is it just felt there was such a simplicity to it, I think, in some ways.
But the interesting thing with Craig, looking at it now, going back to what we saw just a minute ago, Craig always has stuff in a collection that you forget is there.
Yeah.
So in the last 3 seasons, there's been the kind of stuff which is just one colour, but everyone looks at the tie-dye or the hand painting. And then this season was about one colour, and looking back at the last image there, I completely forgot about the bodycon stuff and the tight stuff. And there's
scroll back down to the bodycon stuff.
But I think that's one of the best things about him, is that, and this is his 4th collection that he's shown, and there's this consistency.
Yeah.
You can already tell that he's creating his own aesthetic. Still, at the same time, every season is of course very different, and he adds on, whether it's like a tie-dye print or a new colour, obviously in this one it's very
it's really interesting. It's almost like there you've got the past, because the wooden frame refers back to...
Yeah, that was classic Craig. For us, we were like, that's classic Craig.
Yeah.
The bodycon thing was a new silhouette that we wanted to push, and then you got your classic Craig, the new.
But see, that's classic Craig already. You can already he's already.
We were even calling it that. It was quite funny.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, we're really underestimating how impressive that is for a designer that's just done 4 seasons. This is his first season showing outside of Man. For us to be able to even say classic Craig, that really speaks to his focus and his success as a designer, to be able to sort of have those codes already, because that's not something that's easy when you're a young designer.
The amazing thing about Craig is the way that it all seems to come as well from a workwear jacket. Like that seems to be his kind of starting point, and that's what he wears himself. And I think it's really interesting that he is a designer who does wear his own clothes. I mean, obviously he wears the kind of conservative centre
really
that everything comes from.
Yes.
But I've been thinking a lot about luxury recently, and because backstage Craig talked about silent protest, and he wouldn't actually say what it was about. And I think it's really good he didn't say what it's about. But it did seem to be very much a show about trying to do something different with fashion, rather than assuming that you have to be a luxury brand, or you have to make luxury clothes or things that are shiny and kind of luxurious. And instead it's finding the absolute beauty in something very, very simple. And
for me, it's about good things. I really agree. It's that kind of like...
Well, the finish was immaculate.
Yeah,
and the things,
and you can see it.
Yeah, exactly. And his price points are so low for what it is, and it's almost like he's trying to repoint fashion to something that's about something different than, okay, I'm going to make stuff that's $7,000.
It's quite that kind of like, William Morris or Ruskin idea of putting things back and getting rid of sort of fuss and like puffery of wares and making everything very good, you know, like nice, and
well, it was really good, but it was really reduced. Even like the fact that we didn't have shoes. I mean, it was just every shoe we put with it just ruined the silhouette. So we just went with bare feet, and it's Craig's wanted to do bare feet every season, and it's always quite
worked really well with this one, yeah.
But it kind of made sense, and it felt like a kind of it felt like almost just a new beginning for him, which.
Another thing that I really like about this collection is that it is so simple and so easy, but still very clever of him. You know how everything seems to be, or a lot of pieces, jackets and trousers, seems to be sort of undone, and that, you know, the straps are kind of not tied together. And I imagine, I haven't seen it up close, but you tie the straps on the trousers together, and you have a proper functioning trouser. But on the catwalk, it's undone, and all of a sudden, it's creating a whole new silhouette for the catwalk.
Yeah,
and it's extremely clever, because a lot of designers, of course, struggle with the sort of, you know, the catwalk aesthetic, and you know what's actually in the showroom. This is the same garment. It's just kind of different ways of wearing it.
It was just slightly more punk as well to leave them all undone and just have all the straps like just flowing.
It flowed, exactly. It flowed, and I think that's.
But he really considers movement and garments moving, which I think maybe some people don't, some designers don't. So he really considers what it looks like on the body static and what it looks like when it's moving as well.
The interesting thing about Craig as well is that it's you know, we go to menswear shows. There's a menswear audience. This is fashion. It should be a much wider audience. It should be appreciated by the whole of the fashion industry. But he making clothes for men, but it's of much greater importance. And I think because he was one of Louise Wilson's last kind of great successes, and towards the end of her life, she was talking a lot about the fees and the fact that we no more working class designers anymore. And I think he's a real kind of testament to that, like how important it is to allow creativity to happen.
I haven't had much chance to say anything about it.
I'm
not going to say anything about the collection. I just want to say, how come he's so damn good?
I know.
Do you know, that collection did really move me, and I know there were a lot of kind of semi-tears, I think, which is a hard thing to kind of talk about. But
I found it really moving.
I think he's very clever. I think he understands fashion, he understands form and silhouette, he understands proportion, he understands all the right aspects of what makes a show great, and that was a really great show. Really powerful in its simplistic message. I think he used the space incredibly well, because that's a funny space to show in. But I think it made all the difference, him not being part of Man for that, and then actually showing his own collection. And I think he understood what that's about in terms of creating a collection. It was masterful. And I went away from that thinking, what do you do after that? Because that was incredibly good. And I hope, because I know when he came on the panel at BFC, he was talking about how sales were affecting him and how he would move the brand forward. So I really hope as a result of that, that this collection proves to be really successful in terms of sales.
What's interesting, he has been picked up by some more retail. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that Matches have picked him up. I just said it, so which is very exciting.
I think his
and a nice big store in New York as well. So
yeah.
Tell us.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say.
Yeah. But you know what strikes me is that, like I think someone said, you know, it's almost less is more. I mean, it's so simple. You know, it's very not plain looks, but it's not a lot of clothing on some of these models, and you know, sometimes that's the most difficult thing to do. Like, I imagine it's quite easy just to try and sort of pile as much as you can on there. He's actually done the complete opposite, and it's only 4 seasons old. I think that's a bold and daring thing to do, and it clearly paid off.
It's interesting what Gordon said about, you know, how is he just so damn good? Because I think there's an element to it as well where there is just a magic to it. You can't quite put your finger on it. You know?
I think I'm not sure what his exact background is, but his training wasn't just in fashion, was it? I think he studied something else before fashion. I think
he did portraiture for a while. He wanted to be an artist, and then he was.
So there's other.
He's just
creative thought processes going on.
He's incredibly crafty. He's just very handy.
Yeah.
And he makes things. I think that's what's interesting with him. Is there's this focus on making things with your hands rather than, which I think is quite a unique thing in London. I always think about this, and I talk about it a lot, especially when we're talking about the couture and we're doing the panels for that, because I don't think, actually, it sounds like a very simple thing, but I don't think there is that focus so much in London about making things with your hands. It's about designing things.
Or if there is, then it comes out of being a bit sort of like, oh, I wish you didn't say that. Like, it sometimes can seem a bit kind of twee and a bit not the real thing, whereas this is modern and contemporary and yeah.
I would imagine as a designer, all of that's gone through his hands, if that makes sense, and that he would have overseen every aspect of what those garments should look like, from the top stitching to the proportions, the whole thing, and that's what actually makes it good. It's not like there's an idea sketch on paper. I would imagine he's made some small maquette of that, or the actual garment itself, perhaps not in that fabric, but in a fabric very similar, and that's why all those proportions and things work really well. And he's a craftsman.
Yeah, definitely.
And he has a great team, Helen Price and Helen Lawrence still does the knits, doesn't she? Like, and they work really well together.
Any of his team, they're just always, they're so good. Everyone works really well together, and there's always a really nice atmosphere in the studio, and it's just a really positive, creative space.
But as the season went on, people in other cities would be like why was everyone crying?
Yeah,
almost
why was
like,
everyone crying?
But it was almost like, oh, was it the music? And it's like, no, it's because it was genuinely moving.
Yeah, I don't know. I was backstage.
Well, it was interesting. So I was sat like to the right of his bare shoulder there, and it was weird because at the shows normally when the last model comes out, people then get their phones to take a film of the final walkthrough or whatever, and no one really claps until like the designer comes out, and it's a bit kind of half-hearted. And the Americans who were sat on that side, I think near where you were sat, started clapping first. It was the Americans who started this kind of tidal wave of clapping, and it carried all the way through from coming out. And yeah, I felt myself going halfway through the show and stopped. I was like, no, you don't cry at fashion shows. And but then backstage it was so emotional. And
I was just openly weeping. It was very embarrassing.
You said about someone had talked about other cities like Paris and Milan. Like everyone was talking. It was a bit like the Brazil-Germany game. That show. Did you go to that show?
Yeah.
It was that show that everyone was talking about, whether it was in Milan or Paris. Did you see Craig Green in London?
Well, all the
reviews
were just.
That's really rare now, isn't it? For a fashion moment, like a lot of the reviews talks about that.
Well, menswear, I think it is. I think in womenswear you have those moments.
No, I think in womenswear too. I don't think it's not.
I think it's
not for a while, but I mean,
but it was equivalent to a com show. I think one reviewer did actually compare.
Yeah, Tim compared it to Blank's too.
And that's also really lovely, like because then in Paris a couple of weeks later. They invited Craig to the Comme des Garçons show with Liu Dalton as well, but it was lovely to see them kind of be brought into the family, and I think it's
it's nice that they're supporting them.
Yes. Why do we get less fashion moments now? Do you think fashion moments as a simplistic way of putting it?
You get less. I think we see so many shows, don't we? You see hundreds of shows, so I think. They're all, they're few and far between. You're lucky to see them. I can't think of that many fashion moment shows I've ever seen. The McQueen, Michael Clark show, that was a fashion moment. I mean, they're so rare.
But I think it is amazing to see it's interesting what Gordon said, in that space, which isn't the easiest space, on, Craig's, he's a young designer, it's not a huge showstopper in terms of set or production, and that's becomes such a focus if you think these huge brands throwing millions and millions to these huge spectacles, and when something that is barefoot in not the easiest space, when designer with very little sort of resources behind them, and you get something, I think that's something really warming about that. And as you say, it's
very important to have designers who are brave, because they are few and far between. And that's a kind of credible braveness, if that makes any sense. Yeah. All of those pieces, if they have been snapped up already, you can see why. Because stripped back, there's some really powerful pieces in it.
Well, I think we're done here.
There's several more designers.
Yeah, what else really stood out?
You about Christopher Shannon?
Yeah, let's talk about Christopher Shannon, because I think it's interesting what you just said as well, going back to about Louise Wilson, having some designers who are able to come from not the easiest backgrounds and into fashion. Chris Shannon, he's quiet and he's from the north and he doesn't come from a sort of a moneyed background, and I think he's another example of that, and I think it's so important to mention that he just got the GQ.
Which is amazing.
Which was really exciting.
So exciting.
And that was announced the week before.
So
it was a real like a curtain raiser for for London Collection. And the great thing about that was how excited all his fellow designers were as well. Like everyone, it felt like some sort of win for everyone. It felt like a win.
I think everyone felt that he deserved it for sure.
What is it about him that makes him so special? Because it's interesting what you say there, Charlie, because there is a great amount of good faith towards him.
Christopher is a very, 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 very clever designer, because the look is that thing that we all struggle with, of trying to work out a word for sportswear or streetwear or whatever that doesn't sound patronising. His codes are in those words, but he makes amazing fashion with them. And he doesn't, again, it's that thing of like, he's not attempting luxury, he's making amazing clothes, and it's trying to do something different.
Yeah, he doesn't compromise with it, and he's just...
And what he does each season is he kind of picks on a couple of things, and he makes a really tight, playful collection that like does something over here, and it's like, let's do something over here, and then brings it all together. And what he did this time was, it was kind of the bits that were cut up, I think at the beginning, they were cut and paste, but he did it by hand, he didn't do it digitally, so he wanted it to be like a kind of teenage bedroom wall. And but again, it's interesting, isn't it? Because then you see things like that, which is like a nylon romper, like it's suddenly in the middle of it, there's something really kind of unexpected and playful, and you send it out.
It's interesting you keep saying playful, because I do think there is something quite witty, and I always find something very subversive in what he does, and I think, you know, it goes back to the endless fascination he has with kind of youth and teenagers, because, and I was thinking a lot about this with just how men dress. You know, it's quite a lazy thing that's often put out with genders, and that men and women dress differently. You know, women buy stuff every season, men, they buy stuff and they hang on to it for a long time. But I think there is an element of truth in that. And there is also something innately quite teenage about that you have your favourite things. And I think that really infuses menswear, and I think that's something he plays with in a very interesting way. There's a wit to that.
Yeah. This was my favourite section. I loved
I love that red.
That's
so good.
And yeah, then he does all these little things like that says Gorge Days on the bottom, on the Ford logo.
Like the Ford logo, yeah. It's very fun.
Yeah, it was a super, super good collection.
It's hard to do a collection like this that can resonate in the way it does, because it is that street sportswear thing we all hate as a term.
Yeah.
But again, it's not just that. These are clothes that are actually very desirable in their own right, and all the prints and all the cut and paste, which we start to see a little bit of a theme coming through. There were some other aspects in Paris, as a few. I think he's just done it very cleverly, because they're very personal to him.
Yeah.
They're not really random, and as you say, that Ford thing, there's a little aspects of it that are all personal to him, a little bit humorous. So I think it works really well. And I did actually like all those sort of knitted polo longer things that we saw earlier on, because that was unexpected from him, I thought, personally. I know we had all those Liberty-esque prints time before, spring summer before, but that really caught me unawares. I thought, that's really interesting. Oh, they are really great, and the colours were really strong, and really sort of very strong sportswear. So
let's talk about those terms. You both mentioned that, you know, everyone hates sportswear, streetwear, and that language. I think everyone, especially, you know, David, Charlie, writers here, it's really hard actually writing about menswear, because there isn't useful or proper terminology to turn to, and I think everyone's kind of struggling to describe stuff. No one knows what to call anything. How are we going to? What's the answer to that? Does we need a new kind of new menswear language to talk about things? Because people keep putting things like sportswear in
things.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. What's the answer? Because there's so many words and terms for tailoring, but
I don't know. I mean, we just need new words, I suppose. I mean, we have this thing for labeling stuff, don't we? And, you know, we try to describe something, and I don't know if it's for myself or for the reader, but we feel this urge to sort of put it in a bracket, or like use some sort of loose term to describe it, kind of thing. Which, you know, I don't know. I mean, makes sense. But the more you write about it, the more you use them. Obviously, the more tired they become.
I think the exciting thing is that there isn't a term. That's the exciting thing about London, is you can't kind of categorise it as one thing. And also, I think it's more a thing of time and age. Like it's more when the generation that's grown up with like sneakers become older, and it's just the norm. Then that's it. Then new words will happen, or it'll just be called fashion.
Yeah,
like
maybe it's nice that there's no term. You know, the likes of Astrid and, you know, Nazir.
Also, a lot of them are, you know, obviously
in league of their own. They're in their own little bracket, which is, you know,
fashion.
Fashion.
And they're mixing and fusing different things as well, which makes it even more, you know,
confusing, but good in a way.
Yeah, exactly, confusing in a good way.
this is what I mean about Christopher being playful. Is that then suddenly there's these sweatshirts at the end with these kind of pockets kind of taped on them, and it suddenly happens, and it's like, where's that come from?
They are fabulous.
They're so
but they're really handy. They're like got zips to their pockets.
Yes.
You keep all of Doris's tricks.
You don't need a bag. Don't need a man bag.
Yeah.
Pooper bags in here.
You mentioned Astrid and Nazir, and let's talk about some of the other highlights, because I think Astrid really was a hit of the season. Astrid Andersen, it was a show that everyone talked about. Everyone seemed to find really joyful. I think particularly because of the colours. Was this a show that impressed everyone?
Yeah, I really like this. Astrid show, it's great. The colours were really strong, and it was more about just her being her, and you know, going on with her shapes and silhouettes and her sportswear, if you want to call it sportswear, and her man. I think it really.
It's interesting to say her man, because I think Astrid, perhaps, I actually think more than many of the designers showing in London, that's not a criticism to anyone else, has a man.
Yeah, totally. It's very specific.
You're obsessed with her, like obsessed. Like they're obsessed with her brand. She's got an international audience of like extravagant men. That's the other thing. So you think, oh, this is sportswear. Actually, it's extravagant fashion. Like it, and then you maybe then relate that back to Versace or something.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You know, it's about a flamboyancy.
There's this interesting idea of the kind of new peacock or the new dandy. You know, there's everyone that we always hate at the shows. You know, when you're sitting there and some idiot walks in, they're wearing a horrible three-piece suit, they've got like an awful pocket square, and like, they just look ridiculous, and like some horrible hat. And then you get like the new peacock in a way. You know, and I think that's really interesting that there is this bloke that.
But it looks really masculine, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You saw that at LCM, didn't you? There was this Astrid Andersen, Nazir Mazhar peacocks. You know, they were running around, and they were kind of like, I mean, they looked cool, I suppose, but they were literally wearing those two brands and did it for the whole week.
It's a very different kind of dandy to what you expect, and I think that's quite.
I mean, the word dandy is a word I just said. I said I'll never say it. but
it is in a sense, and I think that's what I find interesting. I feel like people like Astrid and Nazir, they're reclaiming those words, like things like peacock and dandy, which people have come to hate. You know, you say, "Oh, I don't even want to say it," because you associate it with like.
But again, I think it's such a London thing. I think it's very, but that's what it's very London.
The interesting thing about Astrid though is that her sales are global. Like her support in London hasn't been that great. Like not that many stores stock her, and I think people have been really like almost like, no, that can't be right. Like most, and for the whole time she's been doing it for quite a long while now, because she was in the really early installations, wasn't she?
Yeah.
She's
right
been
from
doing
go.
She's been doing the shows for a long while. But now buyers are like, oh, okay, there are actually men who want to buy it, but they're all abroad at the moment. Like, so it's London, but it's not London. It's that interesting thing. So.
From working with Astrid, because we did on Tottenham in the collaboration,
Yeah, you just did.
I now know how amazing she is in terms of understanding what she wants from something and not letting go. I don't know if it's her nationality in particular, but she desperately wanted something to look like something she would not give up. So really I'm going to apply that to that collection. Yeah. So that collection will have looked exactly as she wanted that collection to look. Because sometimes collections come out and things change, don't they? But to me, it was almost like a summary of everything she's been doing today. Just sort of hit the nail on the head with this one collection. I think it's everything that Astrid was kind of working towards is there. So it'd be interesting to see where it goes next.
I like that because it feels very her, but not repetitive at all.
Yeah.
And
there's great shapes in there.
Can we talk about the way that because I think she does play with gender in this really interesting way, which is very different to the way, you know, if you talk about gender bending in the context of London, everyone always talks about JW Anderson, but I think she's doing it in an equally interesting and equally arresting manner. What is it about? It doesn't seem to be confrontational in the way that
that's the interesting thing about her is that that's why the shows are a kind of slow, steady, firm progress. Like each season she does something a little bit more to kind of push her man, and a little bit more, so it's not something like, right, I'm going to shock you with this. So like, they've always been there in her shows, like the lace and whatever, and the lengths, but she slowly, like, it's like, yeah, you can wear that, all right, will you wear that this season? And she pushes him, and
so she's kind of responding but also prompting.
Yeah, and that's why her shows are so interesting, because it's not a sudden like, oh, what's she going to do this season? You know that there will be branding, her sweat. You know, there's a certain look, but it slowly goes forward, which I find really interesting, because I don't think fashion should be right. This season's this season's that. she's in it for the long term.
And I like this idea that men can look sexy. I think there's something quite, women have always been told to look sexy. Women's fashion is about making women look sensual, and I don't think that men's fashion has always been about trying to make. Apart from it's interesting you mentioned Versace before, Charlie, but a lot of men's fashion is about making men look masculine or strong or appropriate. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that she's like, boys, you can try and look sexy. You can look a bit cheeky or something.
Just show a bit more skin,
Which also Nazir does as well.
You're like, yeah, great.
But I think she is a brand. And if I were a buyer wanting to buy her collection, it's what Charlie alluded to. I would know what to expect, but I would know it would be a move on. But sometimes the move on sounds so bland and commercial, but her move ons are they're quite radical,
it's really clear.
But they're still kind of very much identifiable as her. So if that's why I think she's really clever, and that's why I think she'll be incredibly successful, is because if you have had success with her commercially, and having bought the range before, you're going to go back and you're going to build on that commercial success, but then you're going to kind of want to buy the more adventurous pieces too. So that will always make her brand sort of move on.
You hear that a lot from buyers, don't you? That especially with new designers, is that they see a collection or two and they're like, yeah, it's all good, but we need to see consistency. We need to know what you're going to be doing in 2 seasons time, because we don't know you, and as we've all said with Astrid, from day one there's been a consistent look. It's changed.
I remember her at the Royal College, you can draw a path from her graduate collection to this. The interesting thing is, we're actually talking about sportswear. I think she also is the sort of designer who understands why men buy sneakers or whatever in the kind of obsessive way they do, or the queues outside Supreme or whatever, like that kind of thing that
she definitely understands obsession.
I think she could move beyond the 2-season kind of catwalk schedule really easily, whenever that finishes, and fashion expands out. I think she'll really easily slip into doing, okay, I'm going to do that drop now. Okay,
talk to me a bit more about that. Do you think for her that she will become more of a brand in the way that Nike or Adidas?
But it's really clear that's. I mean, she's got a completely recognisable logo, internationally recognised brand. I mean, it's something she could do.
She's used her name on the clothing since day one.
Can we talk about that use of branding in London? Because we were talking about that in Paris, Charlie, and you mentioned that some journalists have been like, I don't get it, why are they all putting their names on stuff?
It's not, I don't get it. I think there were some people who were feeling like it was a thing that they wanted something different to happen. I had a few conversations with people like, all those shows with branding, and I just think, what? I think it's the thing about each designer who uses their own name, they're doing it in their own way with their own brand. So it seems like a really weird criticism to be like, okay, we want you to stop using branding.
But it's definitely very much a thing in London. What's inspiring that kind of?
But maybe it's the age and the connection to sportswear. Sportswear again. Maybe the Nike swoosh. It's something that they grew up with, and it's something they find interesting. I find that it's a word, and words kind of disappear. It doesn't. I don't see a logo. I just see a pattern almost from the letters. I don't see
also, I mean, branding in logos is nothing new in fashion. I mean, to a certain degree, it's kind of built on name recognition, and this idea of status and wanting something because you know where it's from. And that's kind of that's a lot of us grew up with that feeling and wanting and lusting after a product kind of thing.
It's really strange you even mention it, because up until this point I hadn't even thought of that. I don't. But I almost don't see the name.
Sean Sampson does it a lot, and Nazir does it, Astrid does it, but it feels just totally natural.
Part of that world within which they sort of operate and they design for, and what people want from those collections is a sort of element of branding, because otherwise if it's too anonymous it doesn't. It's not the same sort of sensibility.
I think anonymous is a really smart word there, because it goes back to what Charlie was saying right at the start about ideas of luxury as well. And I think there is this idea that as much as luxury is very opulent, maybe it's fair, or it's this or it's that, there is this idea of discretion. If you think of a label like, I don't know, something like Bottega, this idea of things being very proper, and I think there's something almost a little bit subversive about putting your name on something. It is a new form of luxury, which is quite interesting as well.
But maybe that is proper for Astrid. Because that's that world, and she understands that world. So if she's putting it on, it's obviously right for that. it's hard to sort of comment on beyond that, because there's a reason why she puts it on, and
it's no different from Gucci and Louis
Vuitton or
something, and anything like that. Or you know, in the 90s, there was always like big names, bigger.
Does anyone else want
logos.
some more tea?
I'd love another cup.
Sorry, I just did a cheeky tea. I was like, would you like another cup? Sorry,
no, I'm okay. No, I'm good. I've still got some coffee.
Thank you. Sorry, Julian, you were saying.
I can't remember.
No, again, I mean, and I do think Astrid is super luxurious, and also she always shows fur, and she sells that fur. Like she has a client that wants to spend £34,000, whatever it is, on a fur kimono. You know, and that person exists.
That's me.
You know, it's you know.
And her jewellery that she started doing is also incredibly beautiful. It's quite opulent. I think that's what's really interesting about her, is that she is really, there is a market for it, and a market for, it's not just for the logo sweaters. I think, you know, some of the foreign, when you go see international shows, people, they love to sort of demean London that the only things that sells are the printed t-shirts and that kind of thing. And I think it's so interesting what you said, that there is someone who buys that like big opulent piece of fur. Yeah. Should we talk about Nazir as well while we're on this trajectory? Poor Liam has to like locate. What did we think of the show? I didn't go because I'd gone to Pissy, and you're going to get really angry.
This was the only show I attended, and I loved it. Everything was brilliant.
We should say that's not out of any sort of slackness.
Oh, sorry.
Because you start loads of shows, so
sorry, it wasn't like my silent protest.
Yeah, exactly.
You started 3 shows. You did Craig Green, Liu Dalton, Aggie and Sam. Did you? A busy man.
And Craig had been a few hours before this, right? So you were probably in the pub after this.
I was a little bit tipsy. I was a little bit tipsy.
I saw you after this, and I was like, "Oh, what are you doing now?" And you went, "I need to go and sit on my own for a while." And you looked really emotional. So I'm glad that you recovered in time for the dinner.
I think that the extraordinary thing about Nazir for me was the fabrics, and I really thought about this afterwards. Like, if it had been a show like Bottega or whatever, you'd be like, oh, the luxury of the fabrics, the this of the fabrics. But because these is fabrics used in kind of tracksuits, people wouldn't necessarily think about that. But actually, the fabric development was exceptional, and quite subtle as well. Like this is actually his most kind of mature and subtle show, which sounds weird to say, but I thought it was extraordinary.
Yeah, the fabrications were awesome.
It's interesting that we keep talking about Bottega, because it's interesting what we saw at Bottega, which was, you know, very much casual wear and sportswear, and to use that term that we keep all saying, and things like, you know, like rolled up jogging bottoms and stuff. And it is quite interesting, because it does make you think, actually, why is it less valid to see really luxurious fabrics used on a tracksuit than it is to see them used on some
but a Bottega tracksuit would be cashmere or whatever, and here it's like some sort of technical jacquard, or what is it? You know, like
it's got metal running through it, I think, those fabrics.
Yeah.
Were you a fan of Nazir, David? You're staying quite quiet at the end.
That was my first Nazir show, actually, for whatever reason. And I liked it. For me, it's obviously the same school of thought as Astrid. You know, they're playing with similar ideas and similar aesthetics, similar kind of. I mean, you mentioned Sean before as well, and it's quite clear that they same sort of generation, same sort of inspiration, done in very different ways, of course. I mean, I think it's great. I like it, and as I said, it was my first one. It was the last one of London as well, actually.
So it always feels like a party show as well, and it's like, and also a lot of people don't go because it's like a few hours after Burberry, and people have gone out to pack to or go to Pity, and so it feels really quite cult as well. And also you always think, oh, why aren't I mean, it's always packed, like it's but you kind of wish some more senior people would. It's always
full of really interesting characters as well.
It's a bit like a Westwood show in that he's really got his Nazir characters coming along.
And he's got it very. I mean, that's what I said. What I meant earlier on. Like, you can really tell. Like, there's this crew of people outside. You know, they know him or whatever, and they're just there to sort of support. And he's got, and they're all wearing it. And you don't. You get people rocking up at a show wearing the signer all the time, but you know, these guys, they live Nazir.
It's a tribe.
It's definitely more
cult. Tribe, it's a tribal thing.
The interesting thing with him is how he's come to this point, because he did millinery style, wasn't he? And he was expected to be like Stephen Jones or something, and he didn't want to do. I think I got this right. He didn't want to do posh hats. He didn't want to just be like, oh, it's a mascot thing. And so he went from that point, and these hats are, you know, they're his design, and it's one of his kind of trademarks. But he's gone from that to developing clothes. So again, it's the same as with Astrid. This is a slow, steady progress. It's not, oh, this season it's going to have branding on track pants. It is what it is. But it evolves and it pushes forward, and that's really exciting because it's a long-term thing rather than a flash in the pan trend.
Well, he obviously knows what his customer wants to wear, and it's sort of variations of that. And he's not like one of these designers who, it appears, that feels they need to present a completely new and different version of a wardrobe every season. Those shorts, those tracksuits, bottoms, the tops, everything. It's a kind of it's an organic growth of his brand, and it's quite impressive that, as you say, he started out making hats, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that's actually, I want to do more, and then all of a sudden this aesthetic is born.
But we say all of a sudden, but I mean he's been doing it again for years. Like his man was in the one in the caves underneath.
Oh my god!
With the
that seems such a long time ago.
In the mobility thing.
Ages ago.
No,
it was in the other caves.
Had like a man in a thingy that rolled over people's thing.
It was insane. But what's fascinating to me is whatever we're going to now eventually call sportswear, we've been talking about a couple of collections, and they all register in that sportswear domain, but they're both completely different. And
I think that's
what I love is that there's so much, and I hate the word like mileage and things like that, but the potential in this kind of design arena for these kind of young designers producing fashion that's forward-thinking comes out of the sportswear domain and origins, but they're exploding it and making it modern, introducing new fabrics. So there's a sort of blur between something that is luxurious and something that is just disposable sportswear. I think is fabulous, and we need more. I mean, we could be sitting here in a couple of years' time. Everything we look at is kind of this new sportswear, because these guys are going to push forward the boundaries of that.
I think that's what I was trying to get at with my issue with the terminology, because I think you're right, it becomes this sweeping brush that gives people a license to be like, oh, Astrid and Nazir, they're all doing sportswear, and it stops people from having to look at the subtleties and the differences and the unique points of view that they all have. I think that's what I find frustrating with that terminology.
I think the thing is that with them, always the proof is in the pudding. Like, they are making their brands, they don't need that recognition they don't need that labelling almost. That's the exciting thing, and as we move forward into the Instagram generation, into where you cut out a layer of journalism, like it's not needed anymore, and so actually we don't need the terms. They just put it up on their Instagram and they reach their customers. So it's almost like, who cares?
That was another really interesting thing. We had some very interesting chats in Paris, but that was another thing we were talking about as well. I think maybe that does go back to our conversations about the branding, is that these are designers that perhaps not intentionally, perhaps just through the nature of the times, that middleman has been cut out. They're speaking directly to their consumer, directly to the person that loves them. They don't need that extra channel to be like, you should buy this.
It's like what Gordon said, it's a new generation of designers. I mean, the whole London versus Milan and Paris thing, a lot of the designers showing in London are younger compared to, at least, especially the brands of Milan and Paris. And a lot of these collections are anchored in reality, if you like, in the sense that this is the kind of stuff that they wear themselves. I don't subscribe to a lot of the stuff that's shown in Milan. I mean, I admire, respect, and I like it, but I don't necessarily wear it. And variations of this I wear, and these kids, they grew up in the 90s or late 80s, and it's what they show is based on what they want to wear.
But the whole of London Collections Men started with young designers as opposed to established designers, and it's the established designers who have come in London Collections Men. I know we're talking about sportswear, and we only talk about, but we always never have a chance to talk about Sibling. So I kind of think of throwing a bit of knitwear in there might give us a different kind of conversation.
Talking about unique points of view, it's so great, because I think Sibling have such a unique point of view. And what's really great is it's not just knitwear what they do. Their point of view is so much broader than that. I think the denim this season was absolutely amazing. And it was such a joyful show, and I love these kind of Lee Bowery pieces that closed off the show.
Yeah, I love that red lit. It's fabulous.
I was stuck in a car, I'm afraid, trying to get back from something. So I only saw it backstage.
But did you see it in the showroom?
I went. I saw the show, but I went back. I got there just to finish. So, which I was really sad about. But Sibling are another one as well who have just slowly pushed, and like they're one of those brands that buys before, like, oh, that knitwear, I'm not sure. but then as soon as it goes on the shop floor, it sells out.
And they have completely, I cannot say this enough, they have rejuvenated a category, like knitwear, and all this focus on knitwear, I think is completely because of them.
Actually, when I visited the showroom, they just sold to a store one of the pom-pom. If you go back, yeah, so actually, they're very proud of the fact that everything they put on the catwalk, they can make and produce. So if someone wants something, they can produce it, and a store had just come in and ordered. I'm guessing they said the pom-pom, so I'm guessing
there's a pom-pom
if you go
upwards as well.
No, they said the pom-pom, so they said pom-pom singular, so I think that's the pom-pom singular.
Because the one with the skull on it has pom-poms on it as well, which is because it looks like polka dots, but those are actually like raised pom-poms.
Or is it the really big pom-pom?
I don't think I've ever seen a pom-pom so many times. Pom-pom.
But isn't it fabulous to see knitwear like that? You know, like, if you're going to buy knitwear, you're either going to buy something plain and simple, or you're going to go, do you know what, I'm going to buy that. And I just love that. And their craft and knowledge of the subject, knitwear, is masterful. So you know in their capable hands that every collection they do is going to produce something new and exciting within that kind of knitwear concept. And we need more knitwear designers.
Yeah,
I think we really do. You know, we've just been talking about all that sportswear thing. Let's see some
But that's
new
why it's
young
great to have someone
designers
like
coming
Helen
up.
Lawrence, who's got this real, she shows with Fashionista for the women, who's got this real great knitwear knowledge and has brought that to Craig Green. And it shouldn't, I think they're good at talking about it, but there's a real modesty to Sibling in a way. But I think the fact, Sid, the work he has done for knitwear, in knitwear for all these amazing legendary
such
shows,
a strong aesthetic though, haven't they? And they're actually pushing quite sexy looks as well as really punk looks, and it's just so specific to them, which is great.
But going back to this idea of, we talk about Nazir, like tracksuits and interesting fabrics, and like the fact that they've done this incredible kind of very crafty, handmade looking crochet black tracksuit, I think there's something really fantastic about that.
They're also they're about the fun of fashion as well. Like they're very clear that fashion can get very sort of complex sometimes, and you can really question why you're involved in it, why it exists, and they're very clear that it's fun and they can do it, and it's about self-expression and that should be celebrated.
People were smiling. I saw the show. I was like, you don't laugh, but you smile because it's fun. It's fun to watch.
Doesn't take it. I think that's interesting because it doesn't take it so seriously, but I think they're very serious about what they do. It's not silly
really serious,
and gimmicky,
really
which
serious.
I love.
But that's also been the case for many of the designers in London, is that they've been there. It's almost like they've just waited for the kind of like, okay, we'll let you do it, and it's like, of course we can do it. Like it's
Let's talk about. It was interesting what we mentioned before. This idea of London Collections Men starting with the great younger brands, people like Sibling, Shannon, who we've all said are so fantastic, and then these bigger brands coming in, because we do now you have Burberry, McQueen, Tom Ford.
Moschino.
Yeah, should we use this as a little jump to Moschino?
Yeah, definitely,
because you liked Moschino, didn't you?
I loved Moschino. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was extraordinary.
I didn't see the show.
Oh my god, it was so good. I am a long-term Jeremy Scott fan, so I am so excited to see him working with a budget again, because like I saw a show of his in Paris. I think I told you about it. Probably it was this show where it was like an hour and a half late. It was in a kind of old winter circus building, so it was in the round, and there was a curtain around the catwalk, and the curtain got pulled back, and there were like 8 models stood there waving with like hoovers and washing machines and stuff, like The Price is Right. And then another curtain was revealed, and there was a big mushroom cloud with him stood with Devon O'Keefe throwing money out. And that was the show. It finished in 3 minutes, and it was just extraordinary. And the fact he's now at a house where he's got a bit of budget to actually do stuff. I thought these clothes were exuberant. I thought they were exciting. I thought they were kind of quite menacing in a way, the way he used the kind of the branding. Because what he did elsewhere in it is that he did fake branding, so
other designers
branding, he made a smiley face.
Can you scroll upwards and we can see
there's 2 smiley faces linked, which is the Chanel logo. And these are amazing. But there's like Hermes orange, fake Louis Vuitton, and more.
Sorry,
so that's the fake Chanel. Keep going. And there's it,
and here, that's the Hermes tape on that denim.
Yeah, the denim was incredible.
And then even higher,
and then some kind of Louis Vuitton,
Yeah, fake Louis Vuitton. Now people seem to be offended by this show. Like afterward, people were like, "Oh."
I was quite offended by it.
In what way?
It made me sad. Like I love Jeremy Scott as well.
Yeah.
I think he's amazing. I love so much of what he did, and I think it's some of my favourite shows are Jeremy Scott shows. So I agree. I'm very happy to see a designer who is playful and bold and exuberant have that kind of budget as well. But I think just the message of what branding means to people and how you could, it just made me sad about branding. I think there's something about it that just suggests that clothes are nothing more than what they have said on them, and I don't think that's a new joke to put. I don't think it's what Franklin was about. There was something about a social conscience to what he was doing. I don't think this has a social conscience.
I think this has social conscience because it's about. I mean, you can totally go down the road and see
that,
and then it's about what branding means to real people rather than.
But do you know, that's what I think I found sad is that message of what branding means is that branding means nothing. You know, it can be manipulated, it can be chopped and changed. It doesn't matter if the clothes are good or well made or interesting, or you know, you can wash them well, you can wear them for years and years and years. It just matters they've got something amusing stuck on it.
Which I think that's really exciting to have as part of the conversation we had about luxury in London. You know,
I think it's a conversation that's been had, and it's been had by t-shirt brands who've done like Feline, Feline instead of Celine.
No, because this is darker. Because it's not.
I don't think it is darker. I think it's bigger, but it's not darker.
No, because I think it's more of an affront because it's always being like rude about them, and because it's a luxury house doing it to another luxury house. Although it's weird to call Moschino, I don't actually think Moschino is a luxury house. They probably would describe themselves as that, but it's a fashion house, and I think that's.
I just don't think I'd ever want. I think it's interesting what we're talking about with Astrid and Nazir and how organically and interestingly they incorporate branding. But it makes me sad to think that we get to a point where it is like the dark side of the Instagram generation.
Yeah.
That, clothes that just have they're a sweater with something on them. It's that Kenzo scary effect.
I think an important link is that for years, so many of our young designers who we've talked about already have had fake Moschino or real Moschino kind of accessories. So like Chris Shannon has a Moschino iPhone cover with a little chain on it. Like it's part of what they've grown up with. So it actually really connects really strongly to them.
I think, and it's an amazing house with an amazing heritage. I just don't know if I think that full heritage has been tapped into yet. And I quite cynically, I think this collection is just about, it's interesting we're looking at dollar sign, it's about making money, it'll sell really well. But it'll sell...
It's the Kenzo effect though.
No, it's no, because men will love wearing it. Men will get really excited. Like, I've got a friend who all he talks about is this show. And he's not anyone who's particularly in fashion or anything, and he's obsessed with it. Like, I think it actually speaks to something. I think that there's a general silence for everyone.
It's when you said speaks to something, I thought you were then going to say what?
No.
Because, but all that Instagram generation, they are all doing this cut and pasting, messing up logos, tampering with this, that and the other. So it's sort of out there anyway. Then you're seeing a manifestation of it here, and this is the first time I've looked at it in any depth. I'm not really sure what it's trying to say apart from that.
Exactly. There wasn't, and that's why it's interesting you said it's dark. I think it's dark because of the scale, but I don't think there was a new darkness.
But I also think anyway, a lot of the time when someone goes into a house, it's making the house be what it should be. And like I think if you went into a vintage store and found a Moschino like smiley face sweatshirt, you'd be like, oh my god, that's the most amazing thing ever. And I'm sure, I don't actually know that much about the heritage, so I don't know the brand from the time, but it could be that would have existed. And it's making it be available now. Like that's why it will sell, because it's what Moschino should be.
I mean, personally, I think you mentioned Shannon's, phone.
Chris Shannon's phone case.
But look, we talked about this obsession with the sort of the logomania already, and a lot of the guys we've talked about, they've taken that and made their own brand or logo, whatever. Yeah. And for me, I mean, I know Jeremy's been around quite long now compared to some other guys we mentioned, but he just sort of, instead of, he's got a brand already, but in this instance he just played with someone else's. And I think if you go up a bit to the one piece that I really like from I didn't see the show, but go up a bit more, the one piece that I do like a bit more is the shirt with the S and the tie makes it a dollar sign.
Yeah, that's clever. I like that.
That's probably my favourite piece.
That made me laugh because it's this idea of you put on your tie to go make some money, and it's like it's just an S. Then you put the tie.
If you don't wear the tie, it's just an S. If you wear the tie, it's a dollar sign.
I mean, Jeremy was actually one of the first to play with luxury logos in 1997 or something. Like, he actually does own this. He started the subversion of luxury labels back when the conglomerate started being important in the mid-90s. So
yeah,
I think it's definitely something that he has in his heritage. I just think, there was something. I think there was something more passionate to it, and something that was more about social inequality, or like. I just think there was something with more depth. I don't think it was about having a cheap laugh.
Okay, but I think anyway, let's. Yeah.
But it was a fun collection.
Yeah.
It was fun to be there. But also, I'm tired. Sorry, this is boring for everyone else, but I'm really tired of seeing undressed girls on menswear runways.
It's true, yeah, that's
it's
true.
So
yeah, it's really
boring. It
boring.
happens all the time, and it's so. Can we all just say it's so boring?
Yeah.
Because I think designers think it will be like fun and like.
Yeah, and
but it's not. It's like, I'm sick of seeing like a girl come out in a bikini next to like a man in a suit.
Especially when we'll talk about Givenchy tomorrow, but it's Givenchy, like the women are always in like some awful like
I know.
thing like this that they would never put in a normal collection.
yeah, but you can argue that. I mean, I'm tired of seeing girls on men's runway full stop, whether they're wearing a lot or not. You know.
I think it doesn't really make sense if you're showing menswear unless it really complements it. But I don't think many people get it right.
That's what's interesting when Prada does it, because I think when she does it, she's been like, why can't my same idea apply to men and women? Yeah, but I think there's something about androgyny.
Once the first time she did it, whenever that was, like it was like, oh wow, this is cool. But then 4 seasons later, oh yeah, you're just selling your pre-fall collection. It just really just becomes.
I get it. I think if you're a young designer and you're trying to move into pre-fall, of course you're going to try and get some publicity for those looks. It makes sense in a way. Okay, what do you think about it, Gordon?
It's interesting because I really dislike having women in there. Not for the fact that women in the shows. I think we should start booing.
Well, menswear.
I think we should start booing as a sort of just an audience when they come out.
I know.
But I understand all the reasons why you would introduce some women's wear into the collections, because you have an international audience there, and now that the audience is growing, what I'm worried about is that there could be a tendency to have more. So I think we have to kind of consider the appropriate level, if that makes any sense.
Do you not think there are some brands where it makes sense for them to show in a genderless way? I do find it quite weird that we expect men and women to be equal in so many ways, but we find that
that's
very true.
That's very true.
Yeah,
exactly. And it looked great.
But I don't think.
But then it's just a bikini next to it's like.
This is.
I mean, that's offensive.
But I also just think that fashion's fashion, isn't it? Like, brands do what brands do. I think it's. I think also it can also show you the state of a brand's mind or a designer's mind in a way, and how they're feeling about themselves, and if they're kind of a bit arrogant about what they can do.
I just find it really unclear.
But it tells you what they're thinking about themselves, and like with one of the first things you said about Craig was how focused he was, and you know that he's focused because from the collection. Whereas if it's a really long show, then it has like 10 women's looks in it as well. You're like, oh my god, what's this brand doing? So it can tell you something sometimes.
But did Astrid have any women?
No.
You can really imagine possibly a girl wearing it, but I'm glad she doesn't. But she doesn't. I don't think she. I don't think. Yeah, exactly.
It's all about them.
But she's really clear, and it's very. It's very much about.
But I think
the casting was quite good in this with the boys. It didn't need the girls at all. It kind of cheapened it slightly, I think.
I don't know, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I do think there should be a space though for brands where they feel like it makes sense to show on both girls and boys, because I don't think it's revolutionary that designers would have an idea that they think is applicable to men and women. So it's just finding kind of a good space, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't mind it so much, the idea of someone putting girls in the men's catwalk. I just think that, now we see that every season, and we see it in more and more shows every season, and it's quite clear that it's just we have this, and I understand them. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, they have this amazing audience, and this they bought the limelight for those 10 minutes. Might as well do what they can with it. But then it really just becomes like, it's eating into the menswear time, if you like, and they're just flogging their cruise collection.
Who else should we talk about? There's lots of people.
We've got lots, yeah.
Yeah. One collection I really liked was Matthew Miller. I think it was exciting, and he's been picked up by Dover Street, which is exciting.
Good.
Matthew.
Which is cool. I think it's just, there was lots of kind of, I just think it was nice, there was lots of young designers where you could see them growing, and you could see that people were taking them seriously and buying them, and there's an audience for them, so that was really great. We talk about J-Dubs as well.
Let's talk about J-Dubs.
Let's talk about J.W. Anderson. Liam's like, stop speaking in code.
It's interesting you go straight to the super wearable pieces.
The finale bit.
Because the interesting thing with Jonathan was that he did do super wearable clothes on the catwalk.
I felt like the most menswear show.
Yeah, but most serious and most and kind of. I mean, there's still then the kind of this sort of collar or cropped, and I think some of the jackets were cut at the back, though actually towards the end there was, I think that one wasn't, so it was just a lovely normal soft jacket.
Why do we think he felt that he should show a more understandable collection?
I think he's growing up.
Do you think that's it?
Yeah, I think I mean 2 weeks later he did the Loewe presentation, which was a very serious and well realised.
But shouldn't it be the other way around then? Like, I didn't see this, and it's not my cup of tea, but if he's got Loewe, which is an old serious brand, he could use that.
Oh no, I mean, look, that still happens. You know, these things still. There was still what he wants to do, but I think with Jonathan, I've always felt it was a thing of him trying to.
Wasn't it something quite similar to that in Loewe as well?
There was,
more the styling actually. I mean, but no, it wasn't.
But it wasn't as
too
kind of
too similar.
What's the words? Whatever that word is, but I'm trying not to say because it's not abrasive, but it's confrontational when Jonathan does it on his own catwalk. No, I'm happy that he's moving to a calmer place, which hasn't got so much conflict in it and so much sort of.
I thought this collection it was more romantic. It didn't try and kind of.
And it had a masculinity to it.
It seduced you a bit more.
It was just nice to see what he does when he does clothes that you can wear, and I don't mean that as any sort of insult or any. I mean that as an actual positive. I think it's nice to move to a place where,
of course,
you are doing something that's more understandable.
It jumps around quite a lot, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you not think?
Yeah.
Which I find a little bit disconcerting because I'm not quite. I mean, those two outfits there.
Maybe it's just the running order, wasn't it?
But I suppose what I'm trying to say is I know what you're saying. There's the old JW, if old makes sense, where he's being slightly more subversive, which I get, and then a desire to show that the clothes can be commercial as well. But you kind of would think there might be a little bit of middle ground. Middle ground can always be bad, potentially, but it kind of jumps from one to the other, then back again, and then a little bit. So that's what I found confusing. But I think there's some very beautiful pieces in it.
But I mean,
on both sides, on both the more commercial side and the more subversive
maybe it
side.
makes sense if you looked at Raf when he went to Jill. His own line went quite, not Jill, but he went quite formal and
that weird period that didn't work with suits, didn't it?
Yeah. So there was this kind of correlation between him starting at Jill Sander and his own brand, like moving on from
But now is it Dior? Raf is the most radical it's been
for a while. Yeah.
But you can see that conversation between Dior. One of my favourite things about the Raf show was, did you see the jackets in his own show that had the 5 buttons that were exactly the same as the bar jacket? And I love that when you see that conversation in the designer's head. And I think you're right. You see a sense of kind of.
But also, I mean, also the thing is he's had an injection of cash from LVMH. Like, we don't know how big it is. I don't actually think it's that much, but these pictures look really slick and professional, don't they? Like the
that was the
lighting
biggest
in the
takeaway
room,
from the show.
I think that looks great.
I mean, that could be the Burberry setting in a way.
Yeah.
It's elevated itself, and I think he's been very clever with the way he's done that. And also the colour palette's nice. And if you keep going to the very beginning of the show, which will be up or down. These. He opened with these, and there was a note on the collar.
It's John. Oh my god, I can't remember his name. It's like John Moore or something like that. He's a textile artist. Royal College.
They're really nice.
Wait, do I have?
Really nice.
And it felt fresh.
I think it's interesting what you say about money. It also smacks of money, which I think probably upset some people, but there's something nice when you're in London. You think, that this can happen for a young design. It's not right for all of them. Not all of them would want that, but you can have that trajectory. I'm conscious that we've missed a lot of people and we don't have that much time. We haven't talked about Liu Dalton. I think that was a really strong show. Beautiful styling.
But Liu was super strong.
Really strong. We also haven't talked about Aggie and Sam. We haven't talked about Burberry. McQueen.
How much time have we got and what?
We've been going for an hour. I could go forever, but I'm conscious that you guys might have things to do.
I'm all right.
Okay,
I'm all right.
What should we talk about then? Imagine if David was like, sorry, I'm off.
Should we talk about Liu?
Yeah, let's talk about Liu Dalton. Because I think she's a really interesting character because she's so ambitious, and I love that about her. She really wants it to be this big global brand. She said to me in the interview before, I want to be as big as Burberry. I love that about her. You know, she really knows what she's doing.
It's and also she always starts the show, so she's always the first thing, and it's great that the first thing you see is something that's kind of approachable.
Yeah.
For men, it shows that the diversity of what happens in London.
For me, I love Liu Dalton, and so one of the things I love about her is her, you know, she'll go to like sort of army and military references and you know, change them, rework them for her own aesthetic. There was less of that this season. Maybe it was because she's working with a new.
It's all in there. It's really subtle though. It's kind of a lot more motorcycling and kind of hunting, and there's a few kind of British sporting elements, and it's kind of more subtle with the more panelling and on same fabric on the same fabric. So I mean, if you saw the pieces up close, you'd see it. But yeah, it was a lot more subtle, and we wanted it to be a lot cleaner and a lot fresher as well.
It's not. I mean, it's not for me to say, but it felt a bit more refined. It felt like slightly more, I don't know, grown up. But you know what I mean? Like there was less of this sort of. I mean, you know, some of the shirts from last season, it was just like printed insignia from fighter jets and so on and so on. There was nothing like that. You know, it was a lot more, and the colours and all of it. It was beautiful and it felt very elegant.
It moved away from narrative. There wasn't a need for a narrative or a story behind the man. It just was great clothes.
Also, what I liked was that in the white top here, and actually one below as well. You know, these were sort of pieces that some of them I have from previous collections. There were Liu Dalton staple pieces, if you like.
Yeah, she's really
that
good.
She kind of started. She's sort of redoing. Personally, I haven't seen that before.
We consciously kind of decided to revisit a couple of other seasons which we felt were really incredibly strong, and I wanted to kind of push a bit more and do it in like a slightly newer way, or kind of obviously change the fabrics up. And I felt it was really good to put those in.
I like that because so far there's been maybe not so many like, you know, Liu garments. Like, you know, there was kind of the paneling on the tailoring and so on was very her for a few seasons, but it's nice that she is developing these pieces that is very her, while at the same time progressing the collection.
I didn't see the show, but there was some good knit. Was that knitwear? That
yeah.
So how is that done? Is it like a jacquard, or is it done cut? Is it
the one on the far right?
Far right.
It's just like a close knit.
So, it's
like we won't ask you for the. I can't remember what it is now. But on the far left, that's not knit. That's actually like a kind of structured. I think it's like almost like a power net.
Like a bonded netting
and it was kind of quite full.
No, I really liked all those knitwear pieces because it was bringing that pattern in a subtle way. It
was a distorted kind of flower petal that kind of we oversized and we used it in a different way. And it was done in black, and it was done in like a powder kind of blue and a red, so it's kind of really kind of
for me, it's the least Liu piece out of almost all of them. It's the kind of the most different one compared to previous seasons.
We put it in there for
good or bad. For me, it's sort of.
Sorry, it's a private joke. No, but actually, it's more refined as well, because her knits previously have been quite chunky knits. There was the Fair Isle last season. There was the honeycomb knit of her breakthrough collection with the jeans like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So it felt more elevated.
No, it did for sure.
Were there any? We've been very positive about everyone, which I think is really important. Was there anything that we wish we'd seen more of this season, or any?
Can we talk briefly about E-Torts?
Yeah, sure.
Because I thought E-Torts was amazing.
That was very good.
And E-Torts was a show that actually people didn't go to, which I was really upset about.
It was an awkward time slot.
It was really early in the morning on the last day, and there'd been the Moschino party the night before, and everyone and you know, you kind of get it, but it was such an amazing show, and it felt a real shame that people weren't there, and it felt very elevated. There it is there.
Yeah, the shapes and silhouettes were really
colours.
strong.
I love the colours. That olive green, army
bronze kind of colour was coming through.
And the denim was amazing, and we've not talked about shorts.
The shorts were brilliant. Yeah. I love the full shorts.
And it's such a thing that it's so normal for us to see so many shorts and no one be like, oh my god, men's shorts on the catwalk. Whereas a few years ago, it'd be like, oh, really shocking that.
Well, still some offices that are like no shorts.
Yeah,
you can't wear shorts. It's interesting.
But it's now become the norm of menswear, and I think London's been a big kind of pusher of that. I think, and this felt like a bridge to Milan. It felt like something you could see easily in Milan.
And I think it really speaks of the diversity of London. I think that is something, you know, we all obviously we want to support the young designers that we love, but it is important to have all this different spectrum of London, because it's what makes the city really exciting. So it's just as important and valid to have those tailoring brands, and in a way to have brands like the big brands like Burberry here. You know, you need it in a way because it does bring the press.
Well, so I feel like eTorts bridges a really nice gap between you know, classic British tailoring and something newer, and you know, it's good seeing like a full pant like that, and tailoring with some shorts, the fuller short, and something on the left there which is just a bit more wearable. It's got its showpieces and then it's got its really wearable pieces.
I think that's why perhaps it's been, I don't know, why they've been struggling or why it's been difficult, because it's not many brands going that direction. You got a lot of designers going the other way, but this is, you know, a lot of the classic traditional Savile Row brands, you know, like either they don't do catwalk shows like this, you know, they do presentation like Gibbs and Hawkes and Dunhill, etc. He's trying to create a collection, a look, an aesthetic, a wardrobe which is as much Savile Row as it is, I don't know, Soho, and you know, I think he's doing really well. I love this collection, but I think it's been, you know, it's a slow process.
I think the interesting thing that they've done here is they've actually started to make clothes that define a brand rather than do a trend or a look of a season, and I hope that's how they continue going forward, is that they make an eTorts look rather than be more fashion. Can we talk about Man?
Yeah, I was going to say we should definitely talk about Man. It was an interesting show for me because this one, I think we'd all got so used to being so excited about Man because Craig was going to be there, and it was even more exciting in a way this season because it's kind of like new designers in there, and it was a big shake-up. Talk to me about what stood out for you, Charlie.
What stood out for me was all three stood out for me. So basically the way Man works is that there are three designers and they each get up to 3 seasons if they go through. So Craig and who else graduated last season? Oh, yeah, Alan moved
Bobby's
on. And it was Bobby's last one. So we had 2 new designers. So we had Nick Mead and
Liam
Talavera and Liam Hodges. I'm sorry, Nick Mead, for not knowing how to pronounce his surname.
And then
Bobby Abley's 3rd season. And what was great was the 2 new designers were both very different, but both very accomplished already in what they were doing.
The technical skill of this one, which is Nick Mead, was absolutely amazing. I was really impressed by that. It looked really, really great.
And what he did was because he started looking at Louise Bourgeois' fabric pieces, and he did very well to then take that and then move on to make something that was his own rather than using the reference in too obvious a way. I think it's very, very accomplished.
I loved Liam Hodges' collection. I was really interested to see how he was going to translate what he does onto the catwalk, and I just thought he did it incredibly well. And I just saw the collection up close a couple of days ago, and they're just really incredibly well made. And I'm really excited about what he's going to do next season.
I'm super excited by Liam. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah,
this is Liam we're looking at now.
I wasn't mad on it. I prefer what we saw when we saw him doing the installations. I know, I was like the only person that didn't like Liam.
Liam was by far my favourite.
Yeah, Liam was the stand-up. Everyone was buzzing about Liam.
And the great thing is he's had buyers respond to it as well. Like so it's nice that it's
so different from everyone as well.
Which is interesting even with the buyers, because it's, I keep worrying with saying his name wrong, but Nick Mead's 1st season, but he's already got a very successful thing with Eastpak that he does. So I think it's interesting that you have got designers in there who have this kind of commercial nuance to them.
I think it's also to do with what we were saying before about the fees and something. Like I think designers now have to think.
They have to be more enterprising.
They have to be, because otherwise they can't. There isn't the ability to create with support anymore. So it's just part of what they do, and also they love having their stuff being worn. You know, it's kind of it's part of the ambition of a designer.
The very first outfits, Liam's, I didn't like at all. I was going, where is this collection going? It was just like a T-shirt, wasn't it? Green with the if I'm thinking of the right collection at the beginning. And I thought, what? I don't understand that. Where are we going with this? And there was an even more simpler piece, I'm sure, that opened the show. That one on the left. I thought, I don't get this, because that's just very straightforward. But the collection built and grew, and then all the badging and all things, and it suddenly started to make sense, sort of like a quarter of the way through, because I just thought, ooh, where are we going?
It's a slightly odd opening piece in a way, considering the collection. But I mean,
it makes sense once you've seen the whole collection.
But I do think there's an interesting thing for normality at the moment. You know, we talked about this a lot because of the Prada collection, we were talking about ordinary, but I think there's an idea that, you know, ordinary pieces are valid and interesting, which I think is quite
But
intriguing.
also the thing is that you can't really tell from looking at images, but the experience of a show, when it happens that someone builds like that, and it was really clear that he was going to take that and then build on from it. I knew what he was going to do anyway, so it wasn't a surprise for me, but I thought it showed great sophistication that he could build in that way and make.
I just suppose I didn't think it was a particularly it wasn't. Yeah. I didn't think it was particularly well cut, or the proportions of that opening piece. Do you know what I mean? To start that show off with that confused me completely.
But then when you look at these three looks,
exactly. And then it built, and you kind of got the plot, and you got the message, and you got the whole concept, and you thought that actually was really strong.
Yeah. For me, it was. I mean, I said it was a surprising outfit, but it was. But I kind of liked that because you went, oh hello. You're opening up with a T-shirt, so
and bear in mind you've just seen another designer's work straight before it. In a way, when you are showing as man, you're showing as the three of you. So there was something kind of like palette cleansing about it.
It's also his first show, you know. I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does next.
For sure. Bobby now. What's our take on Bobby?
I think it's great, but I think Bobby was probably the most controversial designer and show of London and possibly the whole season. Like, people were really kind of outraged by it, and
why?
Because people didn't get what he was doing. I think
I'm not a fan of it. I won't repeat my Moschino arguments. It's a similar kind of thing to that bothers me with it.
But the thing about this is that Bobby, for me, is a designer who totally represents Instagram generation fashion, in that, like, you know, I have Instagram and I put up photos during the shows twice, during this show, and then in Paris when I saw it again 2 weeks later, I put up that Ursula top and it got the most likes of anything I put up.
But it scares me that we judge stuff on...
No, but because it's a sign of, like, immediate reaction in fashion, and that's what fashion is sometimes. It's like, I want to wear a sweatshirt with Ursula on it. And you know, I'm not that young, and my friends are all the same age, and I've had friends from all over, like, oh my god, where can I get that from? You know,
I completely agree with that, and I think there's definitely a space for that. But there's people doing that already, and I think it bothers me. I don't think that's a unique enough point of view that people want stuff that's immediately gratifying and easy to think that you merit having your own label. I think that's my problem with it. I think if you want your own label, it's so tough being a designer. It's shit. You have to work incredibly hard. You don't have any money. Yeah. And then I look at it and I think, what about that is smart enough, unique enough, skilled enough to merit a unique voice?
I mean, I agree. Like, it's not for me, and I'm sure you got loads of likes and attention, Instagramming it or wearing it. But I just, you know, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, what are you going to do? Are you going to be doing the same sort of sweatshirts with funny prints kind of thing?
Yes.
In that case, I'm not sure it will last 5 years. Yeah. It's very much a kind of like, it's fun right now.
Because fashion has to be zeitgeisty, but then it can't just be...
Yeah, but then Bobby also is covered in tattoos from Disney and stuff. Like, this is what Bobby is. Like, you know, he has, like, something written in Disney script on his knuckles. You know, that's who he is. So, and he's that for life. You know, it would take quite a lot to remove those tattoos from him. So,
but you think will there be a space for it? I think that's my issue.
I think Bobby's quite a volatile designer. I don't think it's necessarily as easily.
I've never met him. I've never spoken to him.
He's lovely. He's lovely, and he's come a long way. But
why was it controversial? I'm not understanding
because people were so like, I don't know why this is on the catwalk, or it's not. You know, it's
can we scroll up it just so we can? Yeah, thanks, love.
The kind of thing of, like, using this Disney.
But that's what he does.
Yes. You just keep kind of going.
So if you understand that's why I don't get why that's so controversial.
Yeah.
I think people just found it overly simplistic, didn't they? People got really angry that it was
because it was too simple.
I thought this last season was stronger. There was really lots more elements, but maybe he wanted to keep it more simple. And
the paper bags were leather, weren't they?
Yeah, they were leather. Yeah,
which was quite funny.
And these skateboards are cut out with his name and stuff. I mean, again, I find anything interesting about the way fashion evolves.
We're getting into Liam now.
And the thing is, he does totally speak to a time when we're kind of cut out of the equation. Like, I mean, we're as journalists, and I find that really exciting.
But that's what I find scary for someone like Bobby, because I totally agree with you when people like, you know, yourself and myself, we are removed. People like stuff because they see it and they have access.
Yeah.
But people like Bobby don't have that. They have a very small audience. They have their friends and they have their Instagram followers.
He's got quite a big audience.
I don't think he does in the great scheme. I think if you're talking about cutting out the middleman, someone like Bobby needs the support of journalists. He needs the support of people to communicate that, because, you know, Kenzo has that reach. You know, Kenzo don't need me to be like, buy that cool sweater. Like,
no, but
any
Kenzo,
kid will see that.
But Kenzo, for the old-fashioned format of having a fashion show, using, you know, this is a young designer who talks directly to his audience, and I find that very interesting. I mean, but I'm not saying that all fashion should be like that. Like Craig is this at the same time. Like Craig follows a different path, but I think it's interesting that. I mean, it's kind of the Kardashian effect, isn't it? Like it's a similar.
But they're mass, aren't they? I think that's the issue. Whereas Bobby is very niche,
and
it's quite in-jokey, I think.
I think Ursula's quite a universal.
This is like the Charlie versus Lucia. I'm sorry. No, I'm intrigued, but I find it interesting to talk to you about it, because I want to get it, because, you know, I love that side of fashion. I do love that immediately.
Yeah, same. I want to get it. I mean, I don't hate it, but I don't necessarily get it yet. But I certainly found last season's more entertaining in some ways. But yeah, I'd be interested to see what he does next season for sure.
I think it's important to also say that one thing that was really exciting about this Man show was that they were all completely different.
Yeah, I like it when it's like that. It's really great.
And that's amazing.
But this is his last one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have we missed anyone? We missed loads of people. We haven't talked about McQueen, which I know McQueen was another controversial collection. I think some people found it a bit flat, but I thought it was really nice to see it kind of referencing really old McQueen, which was cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, really, really great. What have I missed? What was how did we all come away from London feeling? Was it a good season? Was it something that sparked demand? We've had lots of conversations about big themes, you know, whether it's branding or sportswear. It was one of those seasons, I think, that jogged you in some ways.
It wasn't. It was.
It was.
For me, I had more spikes last season, like on a very personal level. Like there was a couple of more shows. I like the ones where you go in not expecting to love them, and you're like, oh wow, you know, and all of a sudden I'm like, I used to be a fan, but now I want to buy it as well. It was less of those, and I think for me, Craig Green was that massive spike. Yeah. So for me, it was one big and fewer of them. But
maybe that's a good thing, because London always suffers from people being like, oh, it's volatile, it's great. Maybe it's a good thing that it's just consistently good.
Yeah.
You know.
For me, it was that.
I mean, for me, it was coming away, thinking about sportswear and the naming. Starting to think about luxury, which was the theme of the whole season for me, about what luxury means now. And so many ideas, and then you get to Milan and you just sat there so bored for 4 days, like, you know,
at some shows I found entertainment looking at the photos I'd taken during London.
Yeah, to kind of get yourself through it. I mean, it's the absolute kind of richness of it all, and the individuality as well.
I don't get a chance to do Milan and Paris, but undeniably there's some excitement in these shows, and they may not manifest them or have manifested themselves quite yet, but if you start to do that comparative thing, and you're starting to look at other shows and you realise how good those UK shows are and those young designers, and some of them are trying to establish their brand. So there's that moment where they've had 2 or 3 shows and they're now consolidating a little bit, and I think that's really important for our business, that those young designers start to ground themselves a little bit, and maybe this was the season where a lot of them have gone through those processes and they're at that point in time. So now what they'll do is they'll look back on that and probably experiment a little bit more, because without that they won't have a successful business. And all of this is not just purely, to me, just about the shows. It's about seeing these young designers sort of mature into potential really big businesses for the UK and for themselves. So they're going to have to consolidate at various points in time.
Also, LCM is what, 4-5 seasons old? It's, you know, maybe it's a chapter. Maybe it's like a lot of these designers have been showing in LCM from day one, and not only LCM as a fashion event, a fashion week, but also some of these individual designers have kind of like closed a chapter moving on to the next one, and that's exactly what London needs to do.
I think it was. I actually think it was hugely exciting. I think maybe it's got big because there's a lot of other designers coming in peripherally, and if you take them out of the mix, those more established designers, and just look at the young designers, I think they are all challenging and trying to do something new. And I think compared to what I've seen in Milan and Paris, it's phenomenally exciting.
The important thing as well is that you say about them growing to be big global businesses, and that's absolutely true, but hopefully also what London is allowing them to do is to do that whilst also keeping an individual voice and a designer's hand. They're not becoming big businesses as in, okay, let's get a design team to do it and we'll go and concentrate on the fragrance or whatever. Like you hope that in 20, 30 years time Craig is still making stuff, and
I think he will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's the nicest thing about London, is it suggests different paths being equally as valid. You know, you can have JWs who's been bought by a big group and is moving that way. You can have someone like Astrid, who said, you know, probably will have a brand that's formed in a very different way, maybe becomes slightly outside of fashion, and then you have someone like Craig, and I think it's a set of options, not only in kind of what kind of clothing you buy into, but also what kind of designer you are, what your focus is, and that's really lovely. Because when you're in Milan, it seemed only valid if you're a big luxury house, and I don't feel like that's the same in London.
And also, I think we should celebrate this time when we have had designers who've been able to come through without having to pay fees. I mean, I do think we're at a critical point where we're just seeing, like Liam, I think was one of the last ones to come through as well.
But I hope that we don't call them the last ones, because I think there are still.
No, it's a new period. Yeah. No, but basically, I think we're gonna see a lot more. We already are seeing a lot more designers coming straight from BA rather than doing MA.
Yeah.
Which I think is to do with a lot of things. It's to do with them seeing people like Alex Wang set up a label really young.
Yeah.
So I think younger people want to do things younger generally anyway.
They can't afford to do MAs, so they have to.
But they can't afford to do MAs. So I think we're seeing much more, which maybe is the shows also sometimes need to have they need a bit of leeway and a bit of grace, because they're making their mistakes in public rather than doing an MA where Louise would have said like, no, don't do that.
Don't do that.
With more expletives than in it. But they're making the mistakes in public now, which is exciting.
It's uncharted territory, isn't it? Really, when you think about it, just a few seasons in, these young designers are just, you know, in terms of their aesthetic, their audience, their buyers, their global reach, is all new for them, and so it's explorative at the moment, I think, and I think that's really good. I don't.
That's why it's so exciting, really.
Well, yeah, none of us really know how this is going to pan out, but we have some amazingly good designers already.
I love that sense of expectation. You don't know how it's going to pan out.
Well, but that's good. I think if we knew it and we had all the answers and all the designers all set up and ready to go, we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about them, would we? Because
in Milan, of course, we know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah,
we already know what the show's going to look like. Just about. In London, as you say, no idea.
I've thought of the designer we've forgotten about. Should we play Guess the Designer?
Oh no, we always forget one. Who is it?
James Long.
Oh yes. Okay, let's do a wrap up with James Long.
James Long did such a great collection, and
well remembered.
James is brilliant because he's a real example of an individual as well, and he's developed for the last 2-3 seasons a really particular look, and it's playful. It's fun. It's another celebration of fashion. And it's very much him.
And it's interesting what we say about Nazir starting from millinery and moving, and James starting from knit and then moving. And
actually, he started in accessories. He did accessories.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting. With just exactly what Gordon was saying, that this idea of making mistakes in public and not knowing where things are going to go, is we let our designers do that. We let them go. Oh, I'm going to move from this to this. I'm going to try that. I'm going to, no, I don't think any of them are jack of all trades, but we let them explore things, and I think that's incredibly rare.
I think James is great because he does things at his own pace and he's making his own world, and I found this show really exciting.
Yeah, and the colour explosions are amazing.
And I was with there were some women's wear journalists there, and they were like, "That was really good, wasn't it?" And they always need to be told, it's all right. Yeah, you can like it. Like,
it was good.
I noticed that with a lot of women's wear journalists, actually, with Craig Green asking why it was good.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that, because that idea of kind of like, why is it good? I like it, but I don't know why I like it. And I think that's. Yeah. You just said something there which I thought was really lovely. You said he makes his own world, and I think that's actually, maybe that's the best way of summing up what we've loved about everyone, is there is this sense of people constructing their own universes, whether that's.
And they know their own brand.
Yeah, their own brand, and that's what's so interesting, isn't it? Is when you see a designer turn their world, whether it's Chris Shannon's little teenage bedroom or you know, who are into a brand, and people get to buy into that, and that's something quite poetic and lovely. Should we give them a round of applause to wrap things up? Thanks, gang.